All right, so again, welcome to our Worker Protection Standard webinar. I am Jolene Hendricks. I'm the Program Manager for the Commercial and Non-Commercial Pesticide Safety Program with the University of Minnesota Extension. Today's topic is personal protective equipment, decontamination, and emergency assistance. And I'm also joined here by Gregorio Mendez Ortega with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture.
And I'm happy to be here.
And we're happy that you are here as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Everybody who's still connecting, you didn't miss much. Okay, here we go. So I do want to remind everybody that we have copies of the How to Comply manual along with some other printed materials that we can send you. But we will also direct you towards some other resources for digital downloads as well, so that you don't have to wait until you get those in the mail. The information that we're presenting today does come from the How to Comply with the 2015 Revised Worker Protection Standard for Agricultural Pesticides manual. And this is what the cover looks like. I don't know if my computer will show it too well, but this is the hard copy version here that we send out to everybody. And it does cover all of these particular topics and more. So, have you received your free printed materials? If you have joined us for any of the webinars in the past, we are able to mail out printed materials. I will be truthful to say that mailing process hasn't gone as smoothly as I had hoped. We had a couple of return packages for undeliverable addresses, and then one where it was just, I don't know, we haven't figured it out yet, but we are working diligently to get those back out if it was returned. But if you have not received these packages yet, and we'll send one per person for the duration of the series, you're welcome to send me an email with your address, and I'll get those sent out to you the next mailing day that we have. And my email address will be available at the end of this presentation. So as a review, we want to talk about when does the WPS apply? And there are 3 conditions in order for the WPS to apply. We want you to look for this section on the label because this will indicate one of the requirements for the WPS to apply. And the WPS labeled pesticide product containing this agricultural use requirements box, when those products are being used on an agricultural establishment, which is defined in the How to Comply manual, directly related to the production of an agricultural plant, those 3 conditions warrant the Worker Protection Standard regulations to apply. We're going to start off today talking about personal protective equipment, also known as PPE. I feel like the last 3 years of our lives, people have become far more familiar with PPE and personal protective equipment than maybe years past due to our COVID experiences. But today we're going to be focused on the PPE that's required under the WPS and by the pesticide labels. So as a introduction, personal protective equipment requirements are listed in several places on the label. This particular label, the PPE section is listed here, and it says it applies to applicators and other handlers. But this section may be larger or smaller depending on the product that you're using. It may indicate personal protective equipment for other types of persons handling the product. So it might have a section for applicators and then a different section for mixers and loaders, and maybe even a different section for aerial applicators. And so this particular section applies to everybody regardless of whether they are under the WPS or not. However, we do have some additional information in the agricultural use box. And so personal protective equipment requirements that are specific to the worker protection standards are going to be listed in the agricultural use requirements box. Note that on this label, the PPE that's listed is specific for early entry workers. So it has a separate set or a different set of PPE requirements for those listed as early entry to treated areas under the WPS. So what does that mean to the rest of the individuals who are using this product or around this product? That means the rest of the individuals as handlers would go back to the original section under handlers or applicators and handlers for the PPE requirements, since this doesn't list anything additional for those individuals. But sometimes in this box, you can see different requirements for applicators under WPS as opposed to applicators not under the WPS on the label. So what is an early entry worker? So by definition, according to the How to Comply manual, this is entry by a worker into a treated area after a pesticide application is complete, but before any restricted entry interval has expired. So here's an example of an agricultural use box. This was the same one that had the PPE requirements listed for early entry workers. And note that there's two different restricted entry intervals listed on this label. One is 12 hours, one is 24. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second. But an early entry worker would be a person who needs to go in and do some sort of work, not pesticide application, within that time frame after the application. Now let's talk a little bit about emergency response and first aid. Immediate first aid response information is listed on the pesticide label. So look for this section, first aid, on what to do if someone is exposed to a pesticide. So this is a pretty typical section on a pesticide label. It is not specific to WPS, but rather generalized emergency treatment for somebody if they were exposed to the pesticide in their eyes, if it is swallowed, if it's on their skin or gets on their clothing, or if it's inhaled. And it's very important to read this information prior to the use of the pesticide so that you are prepared for any emergency situations that may come up. If someone needs immediate medical attention, so if they were exposed and you needed to have them seek treatment, it's really important to bring a copy of the pesticide label so that the doctor has instructions on the immediate actions to take. So a lot of our labels have been revised to include this section called Note to Physicians. And this is really abbreviated information that can direct a physician or medical treatment personnel to immediate actions without having to spend as much time asking a lot of questions about what you were exposed to, trying to do searches by EPA registration number, and seeking like alternative information. If you have this information available, either with a physical pesticide label or a snapshot maybe on your phone of this section, it enables that medical personnel to react quicker, which might alleviate long-term damage or chronic illness. Now, in the case of transportation, the WPS has some specific requirements. The agricultural employer must provide transportation and emergency information promptly for their worker if there is reason to believe that a worker or handler experienced a potential pesticide exposure during his or her employment on their employer's agricultural establishment, or they show symptoms similar to those associated with acute exposure to pesticides during or within 72 hours after his or her employment on the agricultural establishment and needs emergency medical treatment. So if either one of these conditions applies, the agricultural employer must provide transportation and emergency information. Now, under all conditions, if this is a true emergency, we advise you to call 911. But in the case of a medical facility being nearby, or the person, is feeling ill, but it doesn't warrant, an ambulance immediate attention, then the transportation can be provided by the agricultural employer in whatever means that they have available. So here are some basics on emergency information. It's really important that the following emergency information be provided to medical personnel. You can also bring copies of what's called a safety data sheet. So in addition to the pesticide label, which is very helpful in that notes to physician information, the safety data sheet also provides information about the acute toxicity, the potential health hazards, again, first aid information on the same topics that the pesticide label covers. And then it could also provide some other chemical information that the medical personnel could find helpful. So you're required to provide copies of the safety data sheet, the pesticide product name, the EPS, sorry, that's supposed to be EPA, registration number, an active ingredient for the products the person may have been exposed to. Also information about the type of application or how the pesticide was used on the agricultural establishment. And then the circumstances that could have resulted in exposure to the pesticide. So was the individual moving jugs of containers and one of the containers broke or was leaking? Was the person performing an actual pesticide application and the wind kicked up and blew spray into their face? Or was the individual doing some other task on site and went into a treated area and was exposed through residues? So what were the circumstances that could have resulted in this exposure? Now, a lot of times when we get our pesticide products from the dealership, we may or may not get the safety data sheet along with that purchase, but these are easily accessible. One source is the site that I have listed here, cdms.net. It's a public search site. I can't say that it has every pesticide product on there, but it does have a very large selection of common registered pesticide products. You can just type in the EPA registration number and you can access safety data sheets there. The other site is also the manufacturer's site. So if you have a copy of the pesticide label, you can see who the manufacturer is. You can go to their website and then do a search on their site as well to access not only product labels, but also the SDS as well.
Jolene, can
Yes.
we go back again to the previous? Thank you. I just would like to remind everybody that this information also is required to have it, to be posted at the central location. And that's where the pesticide safety information that we referred as the poster, pesticide safety poster, also the 30-day application record. That's where all this information is to be entered. That will be the name of the pesticide product. That will be the EPA registration number, the active ingredient, the REI. It needs to be posted there as well. And also they need to be copies of the SDS of the products that have been used within the 30 days of that. And the purpose of that is for this, in case of an emergency, the information is readily available there. So then you can pass that information over the phone or take it with you to the medical facility. Also, the CDMS.net, that is a good site so to obtain the safety data sheets and probably some labels as well. Just gotta make sure that the safety data sheet, it is the latest one. It corresponds also to the specific label. Maybe accessing also the registrant website might have some SDS listed there as well, available for you to download. That's yeah, just a reminder that this information is to be posted on the central location.
Thanks,
And that's
Gregorio.
what I have.
Yeah, and the way we operate in these webinars is if Gregorio wants to pop in anytime to clarifications, we just roll with that. So, you know, a general housekeeping suggestion, and I've seen this done in a lot of different facilities, is having a second sort of 3-ring notebook available that also has SDS and pesticide labels, so that if an emergency were, if you had to bring somebody for medical treatment for an emergency, you could take that notebook that also has that information in it, instead of having to go to the central posting to remove that information, because that really should stay at the central posting. So having like a secondary copy available in the vehicle or a main office is also beneficial, because then somebody can just grab that and go, and that saves time as well. Okay, let's move on to decontamination supplies. So emergency eye wash. Now, this is a general statement for all pesticide labels. If a pesticide label has requirements for eye protection, such as safety goggles, safety glasses, or a face shield, then emergency eye wash must also be available. So this is just a general rule of thumb. It actually supports OSHA's requirements as well for eye protection. And your emergency eye wash station can take on a lot of different, there's a lot of varieties of eye wash stations. So you can have portable, smaller bottles like the one shown in green here, or you can have permanent fixed stations with running water like the photo on the right. Other decontamination supplies. So the employer is required to provide supplies to each worker or handler for routine washing to remove pesticide residues, emergency decontaminations, and immediate eye flushing in certain situations. So this is how it's listed in the How to Comply manual. Now, the specific supplies are covered in Chapter 3 for workers and Chapter 4 for handlers. So if you have your How to Comply manual, you'll find information again about the required decontamination supplies for workers in Chapter 3 and those for handlers in Chapter 4. So when do you provide supplies to workers? There are several different requirements here. If the REI is greater than 4 hours, so the restricted entry interval following a pesticide application is greater than 4 hours, then you have to provide the supplies for 30 days after the end of the REI. If the REI is less than or equal to 4 hours, then you provide the decontamination supplies until 7 days after the REI expires. So thinking long term, if you know that you're working with products that have REIs greater than 4 hours, you would probably want to calculate how many individuals that you have on your site and make sure that you provide adequate supplies for that entire 30 days. And we'll show you some other information about where those need to be placed. If the REI is less than or equal to 4 hours, then you can calculate number of workers based on 7 days. What do you provide to workers? So first, you need to provide water, at least 1 gallon of potable water for each worker at the beginning of the work period. Next, you need to provide soap and single-use towels. And again, enough for workers' needs. That doesn't really tell you exactly how many, but you know, again, being proactive, it's better to over-plan than to under-plan. And then they have a note that hand sanitizers and wet towelettes do not meet the requirements for soap and single-use towels. So first of all, hand sanitizers are only for the purpose of killing bacteria or microbial or microbes. They do not remove pesticide residues and they do not clean your hands. Wet towelettes also do not meet these requirements. It does not satisfy the mechanical methods of soap, also doesn't many times if people use wet towelettes, they don't actually rinse their hands. So those do not substitute for soap and single-use towels. Where should these supplies be located? So there is a little bit more information on here First, all supplies must be located together. So you have to have the water, the soap, the single-use towels together and be reasonably accessible to where the workers are working. Generally, that's within a quarter mile of the workers. And it must be outside of any treated area or an area under an REI. So an example might be where you have two adjacent fields. One field is under an REI because it was just treated, and the other field has not had a pesticide application and workers are working. Or maybe it's past the REI. Let's just say it that way. It's past the REI. So you cannot stage the decontamination supplies in the field that's under the REI. And you can't put it in the treated area. So you have to have like a neutral zone to put these so that they don't get pesticide residues on them, because the whole purpose is for decontamination. Now, for workers' tasks performed more than a quarter mile from the nearest point reachable by vehicles, or more than a quarter mile from a no treated area, I think that's non-treated, the supplies may be at the nearest vehicular access point outside any treated area or an area under an REI. And a lot of times, agricultural employers will use these mobile trailers like you see in this photo. If workers are moving from fields to fields and they're getting farther and farther from access points, or they're, getting farther and or more away from the untreated areas, then these trailers can provide a nice mobile unit that can just follow the workers as they go, and that keeps it, within a relatively safe distance for them, and they're in a protected area. So that was all about workers. Now we're looking at when to provide supplies to handlers. So for handlers, you have to provide decontamination supplies for the duration of the handling task or until PPE is removed. And as a reminder, handling is not just pesticide application. It's mixing, loading, if they are cleaning containers, cleaning jugs out, that had pesticide residues in them. Those are all also examples of handlers. So for the duration of that handling task or until that PPE is removed. What do we need to provide? It has a couple more requirements. The water requirement is at least 3 gallons or more per handler at the start of the work period. And again, this is always potable water. Soap and single-use towels, again, enough for workers' needs. A clean change of clothes. So this is where it's a little different than workers, because these individuals are actually working with the pesticide. So they'll need a change of clothes in case their clothing or their PPE becomes contaminated. And then emergency eye flushing stations. So this must deliver gently running water of approximately 0.4 gallons per minute for at least 15 minutes, or at least 6 gallons of water in containers. So again, the whole idea here is we're providing emergency assistance. We don't want to cause any additional injury. So they want gentle running water. We don't need a situation like a fire hose is your emergency water station. We also need to make sure that it's enough water to satisfy that 15-minute rinsing time, which is what's usually listed on the pesticide label under first aid and under the SDS. So what they're saying is if you have something that's hard piped in that has running water, 0.4 gallons for at least 15 minutes, or if that's not available, somebody's not on a site where there's hard piping, then they can have at least 6 gallons of water in containers. Again, just a repeat that hand sanitizers and wet towelettes do not substitute for the soap and single-use towels. All right, where should these be located? So all supplies must be located together again, all these items together, and be reasonably accessible to handlers within a quarter mile or at the nearest vehicular access. And then outside, again, outside of any treated area or an area that's under an REI, unless they are all in a pesticide protected closed container. So since these individuals are actually working with pesticides, and they're out there treating sites, it may be required for them to take their decontamination materials or keep them closer to them. So if they're in a pesticide protective closed container, and that makes them mobile, which means that they can bring them kind of along with them as they're doing their job. You also have to have it at any mixing or loading site. And then at the site where PPE is removed. So as they're removing their PPE, they should be able to start decontaminating their body as they remove that PPE. All right, where can you find more information? So we have several different resources for you. One is the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Gregorio is the WPS coordinator. He can provide compliance assistance, inspections, and training materials. And I'll give him a moment here to further explain the MDA's role and his comments on today's presentation. We also have our program, the University of Minnesota Extension PSEE program. We provide training materials, training assistance, and can help with general questions. And then we also have a digital resource site called the PERC website. So this is the Pesticide Education Resource Collaborative. That's what PERC stands for. And their website is pesticideresources.com. And they have training materials in digital form, but you can also, there's also a link to a store if you wanted to purchase additional printed materials. They also have something called a compliance library, which helps walk people through whether or not the WPS applies to them and under which conditions. And they have a lot of general information. And with the training materials, they also have not just the materials that we cover in these webinars, but they also have train the trainer materials. So if you are not a certified applicator or a designated person by the state for conducting WPS education, there you can take a train the trainer course, and we have an online version that will enable you to do and conduct WPS training to handlers and workers. And so those resources are also available on that site. Now I'm going to turn it over to Gregorio for his thoughts and comments on today's subject.
Okay, so yes, just to follow up on what you were saying, that it is available from MDA, Minnesota Department of Agriculture. One is something that we offer is the compliance assistant inspections, and these are the inspections that are not enforcement driven, but this is to help to get into comply or they provide suggestions on how to get into comply if we see something that it is easily fixed. Walk through the facility and provide information and of course further follow-ups if needed. Um, these are offered all throughout the state. The ACIs, the inspectors, and one of them, we are to assign specific territories around the state. Then you can give us a call, give me a call, and we'll put you in touch with the inspector assigned to your territory. And then take it from there. Also, with the inspections, and well, the inspections are unannounced most of the time. We come to the site and conduct a complete an inspection specifically for worker protection standard provisions if they are in place, and some follow-ups if needed will be done. Specifically, maybe some orders to comply, something needs to be addressed, fixed, and then some specific, we call it SOCs, that is statement of completion, a specific time in which a task must be completed in order to get into compliance. That is during the inspections that is needed. For training materials, well, currently we ran out of all the training materials that we had. but they are easily accessible through the PERC website. We are using those training materials. We might have some still materials that the pesticide safety poster that we still might have they have available free of charge. You can give us a call, send you an email with your address, mailing address. We'll send you some. I believe Jolene also have a number of this material as well for available for to provide to the regular clientele. That's how we refer to our partners doing the worker protection standard. They need to be in compliance. Um, I would like to go back a little bit about the contamination supplies that you were talking about, and just to mention with the early entry workers, you also addressed when they go into these areas that when the REI has not expired. Um, and the PPE, you already provide what information where it comes where can be seen in the label. But the contamination supplies, just think of this, when the early worker entry is designed as an early entry worker, then it becomes as a handler. And the contamination supplies that need to be provided to them must follow the handler provisions, meaning that they have to be provided with at least 3 gallons of water available for each of the workers. Also, they have to be provided with the soap, disposable towels, a change of clothing, a tie-back suit. Also, it can be it is easily to be provided as a change of clothing, and it must be provided as well as in the site where they are going to be changing clothes. So just think about that. Even though it is a worker for this specific task, must the contamination supplies must be as handlers. Um, that's well, that is something that if anybody have any specific question, certainly we can address that right now in chat. If you do not feel comfortable asking questions openly here, give me a call. We'll address that specific question to your specific situation. All right. At the end, I will give you my contact information, and so you can get a hold of me.
Gregorio, we do have a question in the chat for clarification. The employer has to provide the change of clothes. So that's the
That is
question.
correct. That is correct. Yes, the employer must provide all of the contamination supplies, including the change of clothing.
Yeah, and as Gregorio said, it doesn't have to be, you know, pants and a shirt. It can be more the all-in-one Tyvek suit, or you know, like a one-size-fits-all kind of situation with the
That is correct.
coveralls or like that. So yeah.
That is correct. And something also here to clarify as well, there is a provision there in the worker protection standard that the worker or the early entry worker and or the handler, they must use the PPE and the contamination supplies as well. So they are responsible also to use them.
Are there any other questions? Questions for Gregorio on these 3 items we covered today?
If my main, I have a sample of a label. There is a specific label in which it has also extra requirements for the contamination supplies. If I can share my screen, I'll take here. And of course, sharing this label, this product label, does not constitute endorsement of the product. I have to disclose that. Let me see. Okay. I'm trying to see where I can share my. I cannot see where I can share my screen.
You should be able to, it should be on your toolbar.
Mm-hmm.
wherever your toolbar went, and you might have to do the
There you go.
three.
Got it. Yeah, I got it. Let me know when you see it.
It's coming up now. All right, we do see
Okay.
it now.
Okay, and this product, the Captain Gold, the 80WDG. This is we see in the commonly used in the industry, and this is what you were mentioning about where to find the personal protective equipment, the PPE, right on this section. Also, there are, let's go with the agricultural use requirements box, which you also mentioned as well during the presentation. And you can see there are the different REIs listed on the label. Right on this, there are 48 hours, 72 hours for the early entry. Again, the PPE is listed right here. This is what it must be provided to the early entry worker, and the early entry worker must use. But also the eye protection. This is after the REI have expired. Then it is required that for at least 7 days, uh, at least one container is in flashing eyes for emergency flashing. That's what the eye flashing. That's what it needs to be kept available outside of the treated area for any worker that is already working there after the REI expire. This is very specific. Some of the other products might have this requirement as well. So, yeah, and you will find that information here in the agricultural use direct requirements box. Also, you will find, that's what I'm pointing right here, it is that when using this product, double identification must be provided, meaning it has to be posted and orally have to be notified the workers that this application is going to happen and happened. And these are the these are requirements that must be to follow. That's what I have for this. I wanted to mention this specific product, but there are other products out there in the market as well that follow this requirement. So keep an eye on that. If you have any questions, certainly we can address them. Okay, I believe there is a question in the chat box. Okay.
Yes. So why are PPE requirements sometimes so vastly different between the SDS and label? The label is the law, but what if the PPE is more restrictive on the SDS? Which guideline is to be followed?
Oh, that's a great question, and that often comes during the trainings and the presentations. The label is the law. That is correct, and the label regulates the active ingredients for the pesticide. It does not regulate other ingredients. Let's see. If I'm still, you can still see in my screen. We can see that there are the active ingredient, which is listed right here at 78.2%, and then other ingredients, 20%. The label only regulates the active ingredient and all the specifications, the requirements, the protections, the PPE the protections, which are the minimum protections required, are based on the active ingredient. The SDS addresses all of the ingredients present in the product. So some of those the ingredients might be also have some restrictions on and protections. And so for say there are some that might require in the SDS might require the use of a respirator, but that might be because one of the other ingredients might be hazardous, might have an action that might be a cancerous, cancer producer, or any other the illness. but it has nothing to do with the active ingredient, which is the pesticide. That is some of the difference. If I will recommend, always is a good idea to go with the more restrictive PPE. The one in the label is the basic uh, protection required. Always you can go up.
I'll add a little
Uh,
bit more information to that if that's okay,
yes,
Gregorio.
yes, of course.
So the SDS is a document that's part of the Global Harmonization Hazardous Communications Network, which is designed for any potential person who might be in contact with that during the distribution chain. So from the manufacturer all the way down to the disposal side. So it's to communicate all chemical hazards, like Gregorio said, not just the active ingredient, but all chemical hazards associated with that product in any capacity of exposure. So through long haul distribution. Whereas the pesticide label is really designed for the end user, whether it's the mixer, loader, or the applicator. And so it's written for the protection during those particular activities. Now, and that's why you can also find more restrictive PPE for the mixer and loader, because they are dealing with generally the bulk containers, also the more concentrated material. And so their PPE is sometimes listed as more restrictive because they have more potential exposure to the concentrate, whereas the applicator is generally utilizing the mixed product or the product as it's been altered for application. So that's another reason why those might vary.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. There is another questions. I don't know if you received it. Yeah, but there's another question that.
Let me see. It's the only one that I see.
Okay, I
I
see
think
one that says, so if I have an applicator working in an enclosed cab tractor and there is no physical space for extra materials, how do you provide them with what they need, the contamination material wise? Okay, so in some tractors, some rigs, they have already included some space or even some the area in which they have extra clean water in the designated water tank that is protected from the elements and from the application, and that is usually the under the cab or in one area which is going to be safely and protected. Also, they might have some at a containment in which other the PPE can be stored. Also, one way that they can be done as well to provide this PPE and the contamination material, it is if you have a container in which you can put there water, 3 gallons, and I'm talking about a plastic tote in which they have the water there. You can have the paper towels, disposable towels, single use, and also soap. Uh, type it suit that will be in compliance too. You can put it in a plastic bag as well and take into the cabin, the cab. Sorry, but also when you're working on a cab, enclosed cab, there might be some instances in which the requirement for PPE might change, and then you might not have it need to have it in there. But if there is a require for respirator, you must have it. Not use a respirator, but you must have it with you. Same with the decontamination material, the supplies as
so.
well.
The follow-up, Gregorio, was that there is no space for a tote or bag. Could you use a staging area? It can't be in a treated area though.
That is
So,
correct. So that will be the specific situation on this the particular application. There are some applications in which outside the field and the approach, or maybe in the side road, there is the tender truck. If there is a tender truck there that is helping to mix and load the product into the, the rig, the application, the equipment, then the contamination supplies can be there as well in the tender truck, in the cab, in a place that can be on safely be inside a container, and that will be, if it is within a quarter of a mile, that will be in compliance of where the applicator is working. Something that it is very important as well, it is that if the label requires the use of wear protection while the application is happening, then at least a pint of eye wash, emergency eye wash, must be available immediately to the applicator. And that's a water bottle, 16 ounces, clean water, that will do as well for that purpose.
great.
And with the tender truck, it might be a pickup truck. It might be an 18-wheeler. So depending, it is just if there is a vehicle that is right there next, or even can be in a car, just driving there to the side of the road to the field. And the material, the contamination supplies can be there. I
Great.
wonder if that answers the question.
I didn't have any more questions on my end. Did you see any?
No.
Okay. Can you stop share your screen?
Yes.
Then I'm going to go back to sharing mine. All right. So I do want to remind everyone about next month's webinar, which is on December 12th. We will be covering respirator requirements, and we will also have some additional resources for you to cover that. That's a very hot topic for a lot of people with WPS, or even pesticide labels that just require respirators even outside of WPS. And so please join us for that. And then also, it will be posted on our website very soon. We will be offering respirator fit test train the trainer workshops and worker protection standard how to comply workshops. These will be in-person events that will be offered in 2 locations in Minnesota next February, early next February. So we will start advertising that on our website, and I'll be able to advertise it at next month's webinar as well. Class size is limited because it is a hands-on train the trainer for respirator fit testing that will certify you to be able to conduct respirator fit tests. And then you will also, there's one per corporation, you will go home with a respirator fit test kit. So that's part of the registration fee. So I hope that you can join us for that as well. We will continue the webinars all through 2023. So we'll be repeating some of these topics. If you missed any of the earlier webinars, you can certainly look at the recordings. But I can tell you we were very clunky at first with the recordings. We are getting better at this process, so I'll be replacing those videos with some better recordings for some of our webinars. And then also here is my contact information. If you would like us to send you printed materials, you're welcome to send me an email with your complete address. If we haven't already sent you a packet, we'll get those out during our next mailing day. Otherwise, if you have any other questions, you can contact me through email or phone. And then there is our general website in which we will post, again, the webinar schedule, but also the in-person workshops for next February as well. I'm going to stop recording at the moment.